Good morning. Thanks so much, Tony, and many thanks to Adam and the Offshore Wind California team for the opportunity to speak here today. And I'm so pleased to be here in California on this beautiful spring morning. Um, I traveled here from my home in Boulder, Colorado, which is a place that, while generally lovely, in the springtime likes to take the opportunity to remind us, oftentimes in the middle of the night, of the immense power of the wind. And as a result of that, I have been reflecting on the fact that it's really the power of the wind that brings us all here today and binds us all here today. We are brought here due to the enormous power potential in those winds. Those among us who have spent their lives on or by the sea can really attest to the intrinsic connection between the persistent and strong winds and our ocean. And the numbers really bear that up. We have 2.8 terawatts of technical resource potential in our deep waters that will be accessed by floating offshore wind. And that's more than double the nation's electricity consumption today. And we're also bound together physically by the wind. The wind drives our climate and connects us around the globe as we experience climate-induced disasters. Last spring, when I was in DC to attend Capitol Hill Oceans Week, I woke up with my throat sore and my eyes burning from smoke brought in from wildfires in the springtime in Canada. And never did it feel more important to discuss, both despite of and because of our hoarse throats, the ways in which we must steadfastly pursue solutions. And as the wind drives global climate, there's some serendipity in the fact that in that same force, we find a solution to help protect it. And we are here today after a year in which the offshore wind industry has faced headwinds of a different kind. One in which global economic conditions have created challenges for a suite of first generation projects in the United States. But despite that, there has been significant progress over the course of the last year as we work to unlock a future in which floating offshore wind is a central part of our climate solution and our coastal economies. And it's really in light of both the scale of opportunity and the scale of the challenges to overcome that the Departments of Energy, Interior, Commerce, and Transportation came together to launch the Floating Offshore Wind Shot in September of 2022. The shot comes with an aggressive cost target, but I want to be clear that that's not intended to be a business as usual scenario. It's meant to be an extremely ambitious goal that embodies what might be possible with a decade plus moonshot scale effort, knitting together expanded and coordinated R&D, infrastructure development, and planning. And I think we're all aware that the value of offshore wind extends beyond its contributions to the grid. It extends to its economic promise for coastal economies, its powerful opportunity to stand up a new industry in the United States, and its potential to be a central part of our climate solutions. And as we stand here today at the outset of commercial development for floating offshore wind around the globe, we have a strategic opportunity to help drive US leadership in floating offshore wind. And collectively, we can help chart a path for that new industry through scale, infrastructure development, innovation, and learning. As you heard from Director Klein yesterday, BOEM recently announced a 5-year leasing plan that includes a number of future leasing auction opportunities. And states have continued to show pivotal leadership in the pursuit of floating offshore wind, and doing so in a manner that weighs the needs of ocean co-users alongside the benefits of offshore wind and charts a direction that prioritizes both. When we launched the SHA effort, we centered it around efforts to advance technical innovation, supply chain development, transmission development, and the just and sustainable deployment of floating offshore wind. And today I want to spend a few minutes talking about the progress that we've made in each of those areas. When I was here last year, I noted that in order to advance floating offshore wind in the United States, we're going to need to support the development of a domestic supply chain, one that will create good paying jobs in the United States and pave the way for deployment at scale. And over the last year, we've made significant steps in that regard. At the US Department of Energy, we're supporting planning and road mapping efforts with a recent West Coast ports analysis, which examines pathways to build offshore wind ports along the entirety of the West Coast. And we're also armed with new tools to help fill those needs. For example, the Department of Energy and IRS just recently announced $200 million in offshore-related funding through the first round of the 48C manufacturing tax credits. And those same institutions have indicated that the next round of applications will be open soon. And importantly, as we're all aware, the Department of Transportation has awarded over $400 million to support port infrastructure development in Humboldt. And we're working to support the development of a domestic workforce here in the United States for offshore wind as well. Last year, here at this conference, I was pleased to announce the opening of a solicitation for a new offshore wind center of excellence. And since that time, we've selected one center, and we have a notice of intent out on the street to stand up a second center of excellence, this one focused on floating offshore wind. And just last week, we held our 11th annual collegiate wind competition, where California State University Maritime Academy secured first place. When we were gathered here together last year, I spoke of the need to resolve transmission challenges in areas adjacent to coastlines, to develop transmission systems that help grid operators and system planners meet our goals to decarbonize the electric system while enhancing the resilience and reliability of the grid. And since last year, in the shot, we've made great advancements in this area as well. Just a few months ago, the US Department of Energy and Interior released a plan for transmission development along the Atlantic coast of the United States. And we've kicked off both regional studies for the West Coast, combined with a convening effort to help develop a similar plan for the West Coast of the United States. And importantly, the US Department of Energy also launched the Tribal Nation Technical Assistance Program for offshore wind transmission, which will support engagement of tribes in offshore wind transmission planning, and was created with in direct response to tribal input. And over the last year, DOE has supported close to $20 million in HVDC research, standards development, curricula development, and more. So we've made significant progress towards transmission planning and supply chain development. But as I emphasized last year, it is not enough to simply build offshore wind and adjacent infrastructure. We collectively face a deep responsibility to ensure that as that development occurs, it occurs in a manner that is environmentally sustainable, that energy justice is a central part of every part of development, from supply chain to import infrastructure to project development, and that ocean users can thrive alongside offshore wind development, and that tribal nations and indigenous knowledge are integral to our planning. BOEM and their sister permitting agencies are leading in this area, and DOE is working to bring our suite of resources to help further these efforts. We're collecting data on birds, bats, marine mammals off the West Coast, developing new tools for environmental monitoring, and have a notice of intent on the street to further advance tools for monitoring bird and bat behavior offshore. Since last year's conference, DOE announced $6.5 million in funding selections across 5 projects to support social science and community engagement, including awards to Oregon State University, the Yurok Tribe in California, and the Gulf of Maine Research Institute to support fisheries engagement in Maine. And lastly, when we announced the shot, we emphasized the need to continue funding for critical R&D. And we're working to advance technical R&D for turbine systems across a range of topics, with over $200 million in support in this area since the initiation of the shot. And there's more to come with a notice of intent, with several notices of intent on the street across a range of topics for over $50 million in funding. Uh, and we've initiated the Floating Offshore Wind Readiness Prize, which aims to advance floating offshore wind platforms alongside the US supply chain. This first-of-a-kind competition helps to solve offshore wind industry's most pressing supply chain challenges. And this morning, I'm excited to announce the Phase 2 winners in DOE's Floating Offshore Wind Readiness, or FLOWIN Prize. These teams were selected for their progress in developing mass manufacturing and a deployment substructure, and the deployment of a substructure, and will now move forward to the final phase of the competition. So congratulations to the 5 winning teams, who will receive a total of $2.75 million in cash prizes and technical support. So when I started my remarks, I was reflecting on both the power of the wind as well as the headwinds we face. And as I close, just one last reflection. After college, with all of the hubris of youth, I embarked on a bike trip across much of the United States, biking against the prevailing winds. And well, I think on some level, I wanted that trip to feel big and monumental. Biking into the wind each day became an act of getting back on, putting one's head down, and putting one foot behind the other, until one day, at our backs, there was a continent, and before us, the Pacific Ocean. And we have work that remains before us. It is big and it is hard, but we have maps. We have our commitment to engagement and environmental sustainability. We have our collective grit and expertise. We have new resources and supportive policy. And in abundance, we have the wind. Thank you very much.